Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Georgia. Dear fellows, dear distinguished speakers and guests. My name is Nino Evgenidze, and I'm proud to be a fellow of Rumsfeld Foundation. And it's my privilege today. And I don't know, I'm not sure I deserved it not to introduce the greatest man ever I met in my life. Distinguished, Honorable Donald Rumsfeld, and please join me to invite him on a stage.
Wow, that's quite a step. Well, greetings. Thank you so much, Prime Minister, for being here. We appreciate your hospitality and the hospitality of your government. We had a wonderful evening last night with the President. He hosted us, and we were able to have a warm welcome to this wonderful country. I look at the folks gathered here, and we have our Greater Central Asia CAMCA fellows from across the 10 countries that are part of the program. And I thank you, Nino, for your kind words. I think that we have distinguished guests gathered here as well as the fellows. We have a good lineup of speakers for the sessions ahead of us today. So I'm going to be very brief before turning the floor over to a representative of the growing network that exists across this part of the world, and have her come up and welcome you all on behalf of her colleagues, and to provide some background on what CAMCA is all about. But first I would like to mention that with us here today we have 90 of our Greater Central Asian Fellows, including representatives from each of the 10 countries. We have other guests from the region who've been gracious enough to join us and participate in various ways. We welcome representatives from Hong Kong, from India, Israel, Jordan, Thailand, Turkey, United Kingdom, the United States, Vietnam, and some other countries. It is quite a sight to see so many friends and supporters of this region. I should add that it's notable that to have such a distinguished and talented group working together for increased regional cooperation. When thinking through this opening session, Sarah Conant, standing over there, who's the executive director of our foundation, suggested that the best way to introduce our guests to CAMCA is to have them hear directly from one of our network's impressive members. So I'm pleased to introduce Aziza. Where are you? There you are. Terrific. A fellow from Uzbekistan, from one of the very first groups, 2008. And in the years since, she has been one of the most active participants of our growing alumni network, and as one of the earliest fellows and a significant contributor to CAMCA and our network that's been organized by the fellows. So she has been a key part of the evolution of what has brought us to today, the 2016 forum. One of the representatives of the 90 fellows here today and of the 147 fellows across the region, each of whom is a rising young leader in their country. So for me, I hate to even say the word, but I'm now an octogenarian. And as an octogenarian, I have to say that for someone well into his 9th decade, it is really encouraging for me to see what all of these young folks, everyone's younger to me, but young folks, they're getting in, some moving into middle age. Fred Starr sitting in back is well beyond middle age. I see Fred. But it's encouraging, and I do thank all of you for being here, and I thank you, Aziza, for your leadership, and please come up and take over the podium.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great honor for me to speak on behalf of Alumni Network today. I want to start by thanking Rumsfeld Foundation under the leadership of Secretary Rumsfeld, as well as Central Asia-Caucasus Institute at Johns Hopkins University-SAIS under the leadership of Professor Starr for organizing CAMCA Regional Forum. A very special thanks to Sarah, David, and their team that really made it so much special today. Let me start also by saying what CAMCA stands for. CAMCA is Central Asia, Mongolia, Caucasus, and Afghanistan. And when deciding on the name, it was really important that the name would stand for all 10 countries in the region. We were all brought here together through our participation in the fellowship program. And as the numbers of the network have grown, we decided that it's really important to keep momentum and work together for the future of the region beyond our stay in the US as individuals trying to contribute to prosperity in the Central Asia, Caucasus, Afghanistan, and Mongolia. Our region has a great potential. However, we are among the least connected regions in the world. Majority of us travel to Tbilisi through Istanbul or Moscow, because there is no direct flights available at the moment, and in some cases, you require a visa to get to a neighboring country. And it means that there is so much more to be done to enable exchange of goods, people, energy, and ideas across the border. That's why our fellowship may be a critical key step toward creating a much better connected region in Central Asia, Caucasus, Mongolia, and Afghanistan. And we start by fostering dialogue and interaction among rising young leaders from all sectors in those 10 countries, as well as international community and stakeholders. The program not only helped us to understand better the US, but it also unmolded the way of thinking that we have. Let me tell you that this network really created the bridges and rekindled ties that were seemingly lost in the 90s. Rumi said once, "Yesterday I was clever, so I wanted to change the world. Today I'm wise, so I'm changing myself." Year after year, we gave up and sometimes resolutely discarded old stereotypes about each other. We built trust and we made friends. An empirical evidence would be to see our Facebook news feed. It's amazing that after network really have grown, in one click you can see impressive people from all 10 countries in the world appearing in your news feed every day. So we became part of each other's life. We became friends that see each other apart from reunions, at different small, tiny reunions across the globe. And what is important that we cherish the same values. So let me tell that the ultimate reason for us to travel to the US was also find who we are, create a network of like-minded people, and hopefully together work towards prosperity and future of the region. On behalf of CAMCA, let me conclude by thanking all of the guests and speakers that have come to participate, many of them traveling from far away. We look forward to connecting with you in the coming days and exploring ways to work together and cooperate. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone. My name is David Sumbaze. I'm director of the Rumsfeld Fellowship. And it is my honor to introduce Ambassador Japaridze, chairman of the Parliamentary Committee on Foreign Relations, former ambassador to the United States, and good friend of ours and a statesman, to introduce the Prime Minister of Georgia, Ambassador Japaridze.
Good morning. When David, said about me that I'm a statesman, I recalled Groucho Marx's famous quote that statesman is a dead politician. So I hope, that you interpret that a bit different way looking at me, but from this, podium, looking at these young faces, I need to agree with Secretary Rumsfeld that I'm also Octogenarian of Georgian politics. So, dear Mr. Secretary Rumsfeld, Mr. Prime Minister, ambassadors, friends of Georgia, I see here a lot of friends, Anders, Svante, Jim, Director Woolsey, Ambassador Halzat. It's really a great honor for me to be here and privileged to introduce Georgia's Prime Minister, Mr. Giorgi Kvirikashvili. And I need to say that it's not an easy deal. When you are MP, your body instincts always push you to grill executive branch. And you know that well, Secretary Rumsfeld, you did it from either side in your life. But anyway, I need to do that, and to begin with, I need to admit, Mr. Secretary Rumsfeld, that you and Prime Minister Kvirikashvili both share, in some regard, a background in Illinois, specifically in Chicago, which is to US politics what California is to technology, and Texas to oil. Of course, in the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, Mr. Kvirikashvili studied finance rather than politics, which I'm often told are two different things. Focusing on the bottom line to build a long-term narrative is the philosophy DNA of a banker. Prime Minister Kvirikashvili, a former banker, does not fear uncertainty. In fact, he keeps pitching Georgia to the world of transparency, low regulation and low taxation. He calls us to think the unthinkable, be innovative, resourceful. That's the only way to survive in this turbulent region, especially with one special neighbor that acts truly the unthinkable way, but in a very special, proportionate manner, following the pattern of the negative conditionality, which is about either with me or against me. We all know that this country wants to rule, to control, to dominate, and is a notorious peacekeeper in a different spelling, P-I-E-C-E, and in that it takes an axis, keeps one piece of land here and another one there. We Georgians, Ukrainians experience it. So, to survive, we need to exceed our expectations. And Prime Minister Kvirikashvili wants to embrace the fact that change, reforms, modernization are inescapable and even existential for Georgia. However, he also acknowledges that while doing that, we should not destroy, but build on the accomplishments, whatever they are, of our predecessors. Mr. Kvirikashvili, having been an MP himself prior to becoming Prime Minister, has a track record in politics. He leans to the other side to build consensus. He holds his guns to effect change. He commands the respect of his peers. He has political adversaries, not personal foes, maybe just somewhere. Prime Minister Kvirikashvili is a very pleasant, enjoyable, wholehearted guy, but occasionally he can be a tough, principled man. Looks like Mr. Secretary Rumsfeld has been cultured in some hardy rules of Chicago politics. But his preference is, as of many Western politicians, to govern, not to rule. We lived through this kind of revolutionary, dominant, overriding leadership from 2004 through 2012, and a country sometimes needs such resolve to effect radical change, but doing that after the revolution of the roses, we disregarded that good reform, modernization, and transformation are not always about good governance. All of those changes needed to occur simultaneously, along with good democracy-building process, with the development of the rule of law and justice, basic elements of the institutionalized democracy. No doubt that we should build a strong state, no doubt about that, but that strong state should serve citizens of Georgia. So Mr. Prime Minister Kvirikashvili has his own rules, Mr. Rumsfeld. And he's willing to accept that politics is an art, a process of compromise, about checks and balances, about rallying majorities, bipartisan, multi-partisan initiatives, compromise and understanding that a level playing field is in the end inclusive, safe, transparent, attractive, and also effective. Naturally, having said that, Mr. Prime Minister, I do not mean upcoming parliamentary elections, which we should win, but do that in a very fair, transparent way, and we'll do that, no doubt about it. To govern by Kvirikashvili rule means to have strong faith, personal confidence and strength, I would say philosophies in the democratic values and principles of the rule of law, even when faced with hard options. And in the case of a country like Georgia, the choice, and all of you know and experienced that along with us, alas, frequently between bad and worse. So we should govern with belief in our convictions to make Georgia not only a democratic and capable state, but also a valuable, I would say, a useful state for our allies and partners. Perhaps it takes banking experience to know that the world is not made safer or more predictable by contracts. As any lawyer would admit, if we gave him enough Georgian wine, a country is made safe by values, faith, and goodwill, which is the essence of any country. The confidence of voters, allies, peers, or even foes rests on a track record, a reputation. That is all Prime Minister Kvirikashvili fully has. He shares all these attitudes, principles, morals as basic element of his philosophy of governance. So, dear Secretary, dear fellows, dear friends, please meet distinguished Prime Minister of Georgia, Mr. Kvirikashvili, whose track record is longer than his tenure, and to paraphrase Edison, he has enough perspiration behind him to make his inspiration convincing. Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much, Secretary Rumsfeld. We are honored to have you here in Georgia, and I would like to thank Rumsfeld Foundation and Central Asia-Caucasus Institute at Johns Hopkins University for holding these forums and for choosing Tbilisi as a site for this year's forum. And I'm glad to see Tbilisi emerging as a place for such regional events. I would like to especially thank you, Secretary Rumsfeld, for your enormous support to Georgia's sovereignty and territorial integrity during your service in U.S. government and afterwards. It is important to have friends like you in order to survive in this difficult part of the world. and I'm glad to have a teacher and mentor like Tedo, Japaridze, and I would like to thank him for his kind words. As I look around this room, I'm inspired to see so many Rumsfeld Fellows who are contributing to the development of their respective countries. I also experienced firsthand the profound impact of a study fellowship in the United States. In the 90s, when enrolling in the top American university seemed nearly impossible for someone from this region, I was given the opportunity to pursue graduate studies at the University of Illinois as a Muskie Graduate Fellow, a program funded by the US State Department. That experience was nothing short of life-changing, and it motivates my efforts to forge closer ties between Georgia and the United States. I am excited that you are here to discuss important geopolitical and economic developments in the region. From my perspective, the timing for this forum could not be better, as last month we celebrated Georgia's 25th anniversary of regaining independence. Our small nation has overcome poverty, has gone through the civil war, invasion by Russia, and partial occupation by a neighbor many times our size. We have built a modern, dynamic, democratic state. While there is still more work to be done, and we are fully committed to making Georgia as an outstanding country with its institutional democracy. We did not do this alone. Friends and allies helped us get to where we are. First and foremost, the United States. We feel this debt keenly, and we are committed to repaying our part of this bargain to preserve the values we share. Our nation's success is rooted in three pillars: economic development, security, and democracy. While I will focus my remarks today on economic development, it is important that I update you on all three pillars as they are interrelated. In recent years, we have made great strides in making Georgia an attractive place for international investment. In the first quarter of this year, foreign direct investments in Georgia reached $376 million, more than double FDI in the same period of the last year. Our generally cooperative relationships with all our neighbors and near neighbors make us an excellent jumping-off spot for doing business in the Caucasus, Middle East, Turkey, or even Russia. When investors look at Georgia, they see a country that is stable, welcoming, and on the rise. According to the World Bank, we are one of the easiest countries to do business in. We have the 9th lowest tax burden in the world, and all the major credit rating agencies consider Georgia as a stable country. We believe promoting internal economic development goes hand in hand with attracting investment. My government has adopted a 4-point reform agenda designed to ensure sustainable development and inclusive growth. Reforms will cover the tax system and capital markets, as well as the education, health, and pension systems. All of this underscores the government's commitment to creating a modern, educated, and healthy Georgian workforce that is ready to compete in the global economy. After more than a decade of successful reforms and considerable public investment, Georgia is becoming a vital connector for transport and transit on the Silk Road. We are working hard to install the necessary hardware, transport, and logistics infrastructure. In parallel, we are making a lot of progress on acquiring software of international trade. With respect to transport and logistics infrastructure, the further development of our Black Sea port is a critical step. The new Anaklia deep sea water port which is being developed by a consortium that includes the US-based Conti Group from New Jersey and the Georgian company Tbilisi Group, will handle 100 million tons of cargo annually and accommodate large Panamax-type vessels. We are also modernizing our railway network, and 2 large tunnels are being constructed to connect Georgia's east and west, which will increase rail speed by 50% and triple our network capacity. Together with our Azeri partners, we are building Azeri and Turkish partners, we are building Baku-Tbilisi-Kars Railroad, which will connect Georgia and Azerbaijan to Turkey and through it to the European Union. This will allow 45% faster delivery from Asia to Europe. The East-West Highway, Georgia's main transport vessel glut, is also being upgraded with the help of World Bank, Asian Development Bank, and other donors. Logistics is an area that will require ongoing investment. It is encouraging that international companies sense the opportunity and are willing to invest. For instance, Gebrüder Weiss, an Austrian transportation giant, partnered with Tegeta Motors from Georgia to build Georgia's first A-class logistics center at Tbilisi International Airport. We are working to build on all this hardware by putting in place the right software. We already enjoy free trade with markets totaling 900 million consumers, spanning from the EU, Turkey, and the CIS countries to the United States, Canada, Japan, and EFTA countries, which includes Iceland, Liechtenstein, Norway, and Switzerland. The deep and comprehensive free trade area with the European Union that took effect in 2014 gives Georgia the opportunity to further integrate into EU markets and diversify its economy. The DCFTA also carries important benefits for our partners, potentially enabling Chinese and other companies to supply the EU market in a more cost-effective manner. When it comes to trade promotion, China is one of our top priorities. We conducted joint feasibility study of a Chinese-Georgian free trade agreement and have already begun negotiations. Our analysis indicates the free trade agreement will boost Georgian exports to China by almost 10% per year, including a nearly 29% increase in the export of wine products. What's more, by building on our existing free trade frameworks, a free trade agreement with China will give Georgia access to 1/3 of the world population. On top of these free trade agreements, we are implementing a holistic approach to border management modernization. The excellent balance between trade facilitation and customs control that we've achieved is dramatically increasing capacity. We are also working to harmonize tariffs and customs procedures. Already today, goods transit through Georgia from Asia to Europe and back again with remarkable ease and low cost. Let me turn to the security situation, because economic development depends upon stability and peace. Our relationships with our NATO allies is excellent. Georgia's European and Euro-Atlantic choice, which is the will of Georgian people, is irreversible. Our cooperation with NATO represents progress towards a more secure future for all. Unfortunately, Georgia's aspiration to join the democratic family of European nations is falsely perceived as a threat by our northern neighbor. Georgia's membership in NATO will widen the zone of security and stability in Europe, and we know that a stable region is a precondition for economic prosperity. Security and prosperity are nothing without freedom. In the past, the lack of an independent judiciary in Georgia was a challenge to the country's democracy. We have taken consistent and decisive steps to protect the judicial branch from political, financial, or any other influences. And we have ensured that judges and prosecutors have life tenure and peer-to-peer regulatory oversight. We firmly believe in freedom of expression and free media. In 2015, Reporters Without Borders rated Georgia as a leader in Eastern Europe, and Georgia has advanced in the most recent rankings. Our commitment to freedom of expression is crucial, especially this year, as we look ahead to October's parliamentary elections. Since 2012, we have delivered free elections at both the local and presidential levels. We eagerly anticipate election monitoring this year as we work to ensure that 2016 elections are the most transparent and fair in Georgia's history. This democratic progress is squarely in line with the values of Georgian people. As Georgians, we are proud that our country's economic and democratic progress is a vital source of regional stability. We appreciate the important role of the CAMCA Forum in helping advance regional economic growth and development. To all participants, and especially the fellows, let this gathering strengthen your resolve to work together to ensure that peace, stability, and democracy prevails. Once again, I would like to thank organizers for choosing Georgia for this very important forum, for your commitment to this region, and I wish you all to have a pleasant and productive stay in Georgia. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. For my next act, good morning. I think it's a reasonable question to ask, if impolite, does CAMCA exist? In any sense other than this wonderful group of friends, this amazing assembly of talent, which has certain common ideals, but without a party line. But does it exist beyond that? And I think we have to be sober about this and acknowledge that in many cases, we have to say the answer is no. How few visits, mutual visits, we've talked about this before, have taken place. Fellows from one country to another, how difficult it is to do it. What complications there exist simply in getting from one country to another, as we heard at the beginning, without going through a third or fourth country. In fact, within CAMCA is active military strife, as we've seen in the last weeks. We can't be naive about this. This is reality. Moreover, it's worth noting that CAMCA has no institutional identity other than this group. Within Central Asia, there is only one, and that is the nuclear-free zone. There are other meetings. There are many meetings where people from Central Asia get together, but those are all organized by outside agencies or states. They are not purely of Central Asia, Afghanistan, and similarly in the Caucasus. The institutionalization of this region of the world, in other words, is very low at this point. We also have to be sober about the economic reality. Until recently, we had, for example, in Kyrgyzstan, the great Dardoy market, the Aksu market, which were regional in scope. Those really have lost their character, as you all know, and you know the causes of that. So we have a region, this vast region, that is unique in the world, in that it is surrounded by nuclear states. Think about it. Russia, China, India, Pakistan, probably Iran. This is dangerous territory. You don't want these great behemoths bumping heads on your territory. And yet there is no institutionalization adequate to the needs of CAMCA. I would submit, and my apologies for this hypothesis, that there was a greater degree of cooperation in late Soviet times within the region than there is today. Why? Because in the 60s and 70s, you had, in Central Asia at least, you had Rashidov, Usubaliev, you had Kunaev, and the others working very, very carefully together and creating, under the Soviet umbrella, a zone of semi-sovereignty that they were protecting very, very carefully. We don't even have that today. So I think one can be reasonably confident in saying CAMCA in this sense doesn't exist. However, you know, in Newtonian mechanics, you have momentum and you have inertia, and you have centrifugal and centripetal. And yes, it's true, the centrifugal forces within our region, whether you want to define it as a single entity or with sub-entities of the Caucasus, Central Asia, and so on, the centripetal forces do exist. And I want to take this time to pause and focus on them, because they may be greater than we think. What do I have in mind? Well, first of all, the flights, air flights, again, you're getting to one place or another within the region. I count 14 new ones in the last year. That's good. It's not as many as are needed, but there are more flights and there are more being planned, and from several points. For example, Afghanistan, which was totally isolated from the rest of it. Now you look at the flights leaving Mazar-i-Sharif, and they're going around the world, but they will also connect more and more, and Kabul with Central Asia, with the Caucasus. This is something new. Visits. I've just in conversations among our fellows, I've heard of, I count 16 visits, and I'm sure there are a lot more that have taken place in the last year. There's a growing interaction even in our group. Now, how do you measure, more concretely, these centripetal forces, if they exist? Well, there is a political scientist named Karl Deutsch, German origin. He spoke English that was unintelligible, but interesting. And he came up with the idea, with the question, can there be a kind of community at the North Atlantic level? He did this back in the 50s and 60s. He came to the conclusion, yes, there can be. Why? Because he counted back then first-class letters and telephone calls. And he said, look how much interaction, how much communication is taking place among these. This provides a basis, he even said, for political community. Karl Deutsch. Now, it's very difficult to apply this methodology to the Caucasus and Central Asia. Data is hard to get. I've tried, but I do find using only old communication, literally first-class mail and telephone calls, about a 20% increase in the last 2 years. There's something happening, in other words. That's clear. How much? Maybe one of you will figure out. There's something happening across borders. What's happening with the new technologies is of course bound to be much more. Now, then in transport, well, you know how much effort went into creating CASA 1000. This is transnational but regional, this is going to be a big success. And similarly, TAPI, our fellow Waisi here is at the center of that, building a pipeline that would go from Turkmenistan right across Afghanistan to Pakistan and India. And this will be followed with roads, railroads, and even fiber optic. This is moving forward. Last year at this time, we couldn't say that. It is actually moving forward, and some very clever work, and maybe Wahid, you'll speak about this later. This is important, and these are just straws in the wind. Roads, railroads, you know what's happening there. We talk a lot about China's new Silk Road, but be honest about it, the countries of the region have already made huge investments of their own. This is not a Chinese project solely. That China repackaged what it was largely doing already and incorporated into it what many other countries were doing. This is all very positive, but it involves much more active participation by the CAMCA countries than has been acknowledged, it seems to me. And you have the north-south links have greatly intensified in the last year. Mr. Modi's visit and his announcements regarding the port at Chabahar, very important development, because in a sense this is creating a port for all of Central Asia and even the Caucasus to the south. And meanwhile, you have China and Pakistan developing the port at Gwadar. Wonderful. You end up with two ports competing with each other, driving prices down. Again, attracting trade on a large regional basis and transport out to the south. A new and very ancient route. Now let me give an example, personal. I met about 6 years ago a farmer smack in the middle of Tajikistan who had been, there had been terrible fighting in his area during the Civil War. And I went back to see him when I was there last, and he's now raising potatoes. I said, you don't eat potatoes here. Your cuisine is not a potato regime. He said, that's true. I take them in a new truck that I bought, and I deliver them to Pakistan, across Afghanistan. So this is happening. This would have been unthinkable just a few years ago. So what does this mean for business? Well, an external firm that wants to do business with CAMCA countries still has to make 10 separate arrangements. There's no one-stop shopping. We're not even close to that. But that said, there's a lot of movement, as you know, in the direction of simplifying that. For example, the countries around the Caspian are in touch to ease transport and codify the rules and regulations for the 3 new ports that are being built. The Caspian is being bridged in a way that has not existed ever in history. It's happening right now, and they're in touch with each other. These 3 great new ports that are being created, all absolutely de novo. It's striking. Beyond that, here in this region, Georgia, Azerbaijan, very, very active trade. Each has moved up in the other's ranking in terms of position of trade. There's a lot of people going back and forth. There are investments in both directions. These far more than existed just 5 years ago. This is new. This is something very important taking place. And you have many countries in the region, beginning, by the way, with Afghanistan, joining the international rules on transport, the International Road Transport Union in Geneva, the TIR regulations. This isn't simple. If you want to play in the international game, transport, you have to be part of that, and countries in the region are joining. This is very, very positive development. Now, there are other things. We know there's some terrible relations, even warfare, within the CAMCA region. What we don't adequately focus on is the transformations that have occurred. Uzbekistan and Turkmenistan, for 400 years, they were at each other's throat, Turkmen and Uzbeks, and don't have to go through the whole history. It was not a happy relationship. Yet, when Turkmenistan invented the idea of a pipeline to China, and that came from Turkmenistan, the idea did not come from China. Chinese doubted that it would happen. When Turkmenistan did this, they knew they had to have the cooperation of the Uzbeks. And so within 2 weeks, a 500-year enmity was removed. And this is now one of the most cordial relationships within the region. And that's not the only transformation. We don't talk about it because most of the information is not publicly available, but there's a lot of communication going on between Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan. We hear about the often unfriendly relations among the presidents. That isn't the whole story. Nor is it today between Tajikistan and Uzbekistan. Things are happening. That's what I want to suggest. And these have great implications for the future. But now let me ask in closing. Okay, fine. These are all practical arrangements that I'm speaking about. They're positive, but is there any deeper, if you will, cultural basis for this? And the answer is yes. And I apologize for using the example of the fate of my own book, Lost Enlightenment, about this larger region, but it's relevant in this case because it's being translated into all the languages of the region. Why does President Ghani, who is a very reform-minded, modern guy, he is involved with this? Why is Mr. Kalimbetov, who was governor of the National Bank of Kazakhstan, now running the great new international investment and port facility in Astana, he was involved with the translations there. Why? And these are very forward-thinking people because they saw in this history a basis for linking arms across the region. Similarly, why did Mr. Berdimuhamedov, who we do not normally rank in the same group with these other two, he has his own approach to national development, yet if you go to Ashgabat, you will find in the center a brand new park, beautiful park, with all statues 4 meters high of these great thinkers from the past of the region. And when I saw these, I asked, you are aware that these aren't all Turkmen? The answer was wonderful. I said, of course we're aware of that. These people are our common heritage. And then, similarly, a year and a half ago, President Karimov in Uzbekistan held a big conference in Samarkand to talk about these great figures from the past. And every time, instead of saying our Ibn Sina, our Biruni, meaning Uzbekistan, he said ours, and each time said, I mean all of ours. In other words, exactly the same concept. This is our common heritage. So there is a search going on, a very geographically very broad, embracing Mongolia too, by the way, a big search going on for a common, is there a common heritage? And if so, what is it? How do we rediscover it? How do we embrace it? And can it serve as a foundation for our future? These are open questions. I don't want to exaggerate my hypothesis here, but I would submit that since we gathered in the last year, or especially over the last 2 years, the curve of intra-regional relationships has actually hit the bottom and is coming up, beginning to come up the other side. It seems to me that you, men and women, who are associated with this wonderful project, are better positioned than anyone else to make this a reality. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fred, and thank you very much, Mr. Prime Minister. Mr. Prime Minister, thank you very much for honoring us with your presence and opening remarks. Please enjoy your coffee break, and we'll resume at 10:30 sharp.